Today I'm gonna be grading a shot. So timeline 4K, color management, DaVinci RGB. Timeline is set to DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. Output is my deliverable Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. The reason I have the timeline color space will be evident in a couple seconds. So got my footage on my timeline. It's just me walking into frame, sitting down, getting up. I use this in the project, doesn't matter. So we're gonna start out with two nodes. These are my color space transform nodes. So I'm gonna add the CST, and this is purely for your benefit. I never actually label my nodes. Like, I'm very disorganized the first pass of a grade, definitely, just because I'm kind of going off of vibes. But essentially what this does, right, we're going to take my camera color profile, which I shot on my Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro, so Blackmagic Wide Gamut Gen 4.5 and Blackmagic Design Film Gen 5 into timeline. So we're using DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate, but since it's annoying to go and select those every time, that's why I used the timeline. This other CST, we're going to go from timeline DaVinci Wide Gamut into our deliverable Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. So immediately now it looks like normal footage out of a camera, so that's pretty good. Next step, actually, we're going to be adding in the film look, filmlet. I like to do this, set it and then grade kind of around it, and we're going to be going from Rec 709 Gamma 2.4 into Rec 709 Cineon Film Log, because the LUTs that I'm using, it's the film looks in DaVinci, built into DaVinci, and they're Rec 709 and they use Cineon Film Log, so I'm going to choose one. I like these Kodak ones. I kind of go off the vibes of what I think is going to fit better. I'm liking this, so I'm going to drop that on here, and I'm going to take these two and create a compound node. That way I can adjust the output for this one node and it'll work on both. I'm preserving correct color management, and I'll set that maybe to like 0.35. That's a good start. Now, obviously this shot is not looking that good right now. If you look at the parade, like, it's too dark, clearly. So I'm gonna do exposure and contrast. Exposure, I just used the exposure slider here. I'll do 1 for now. And now to adjust contrast, I don't really use contrast wheels. It can be somewhat intuitive, but I like this technique better, which is go to these 3 dots, turn on editable splines. Now, if I look at this curves graph and I click one of the points, I can move around this spline handle. And this is my favorite way to get contrast, because it lets you get contrast in the middle portion of the image, because I don't want super bright highlights and super dark like shadows, just because it does not look good. You want a large amount of your dynamic range in the middle of those values. So I'm going to take this and bring it down. And the reason that I am doing this is so that my highlights are sort of rolling off of here. So exponentially, as it gets brighter, it'll all come to a point at this value, which is not the maximal brightness. Makes it a little bit better, in my opinion, than that. And then using these is very intuitive. Take both handles, you can move it up and down, left and right, and find very intuitively what's looking good. Bring this up just a touch. There you go. Now, I also like to just check on my exposure to see if it's good using the Dehancer Monitor plugin, which is free. Turn on false color, and then you can kind of see this is like middle gray is the ideal sort of exposure, but you like to have a good range and be able to make out the form even with this. So I think I'm reasonably happy with that. Deactivate that. Now, it's looking a lot better. I'm gonna add in this node, and we're going to do this as color. First things first, I want to increase the saturation. I could use this slider, but I have a different technique, which is luminance versus saturation curve. I'll just raise that up in the middle. My sort of reasoning for this is, in your retina, you have cones, which are color sensitive but not very light sensitive, and you have rods, which are light sensitive but not very color sensitive. So that means that when it's bright out, when there's a lot of light on something, you can make out the color. The colors are a lot more saturated. And then when it gets darker, you have more rods taking over than cones, so you can make out less color. So I'm gonna take this bottom thing and just bring it down, and you can sort of choose how extreme you want this to be. I might bring this up a little bit, but I'm liking this a lot better than just increasing the saturation. The next thing I want to do is just make sure that my skin tone is correct. So I'm gonna go over here. This line is the skin tone line, so when I put the qualifier, this should be over here. And I like to just use offset, to be quite honest. It's not, super clean, but I'm not too pressed about my greens and having the exact right shade of green per se, or at least yet. Like, I think that looks fine. and the skin tone is falling on the right spot. So that's a good adjustment. Next step, I do think that I'm a little bit too dark here, so I'm gonna add in a mask for this one, just a circle, put it over me, the subject, and feather that out. And now I'm going to just increase the exposure and see what that does. And as you change it, it can look more obvious. I do think if you have the right amount of feather on this mask, if it's the right size, really just try to reset your eyes. Don't look at it too much. You know, move it around, look back, and if it looks normal and you can't really tell that there's that circle, then you're good to go. This background is very forgiving because there's a lot of variation in the lighting. It's not always like that. It's maybe a little too noticeable, so and maybe I'll just see one stop. Okay, I'm liking that. So this is step one of making your eye fall towards the subject, and right now everything is still kind of chaotic. It's hard to separate me from this background, but this is where the secret sauce comes in. So I'm gonna do a vignette type of thing. First step is going to be the actual vignette, and instead of using the node, I'm just going to use a mask, feather that out, and invert it, and you can see already, right, boom, vignette. So that can give you an idea that, like, okay, that's gonna work to isolate my subject. What I'm actually gonna do is move this a little bit more here, which technically is not correct, but I don't really care. Now, what I want as this sort of, you know, as it gets towards the edge of the frame, I want my saturation to be lower, especially I think in the greens, but you don't have to get too selective. That's pretty extreme. I'm going to make that a little more subtle, bring down my exposure. So that makes a big difference. Is it dramatic? Kinda, but again, it's the kind of thing where if it's a little too dramatic, you can just make it a little more subtle, and once again, just try to reacclimate your eyes, see if it looks normal. If it does, then you're chilling. The next step I'm going to do is this radial blur. It's a little artsy. If you look here, like, obviously way too intense, but I'm gonna again put this on me and change it from symmetric to clockwise and just turn down that strength. And again, like, this is not granular enough. I might set it to just 0.4 and just change the gain on the node to maybe 0.1, 0.25. Okay, I'm liking that. Now, one step I forgot, or not really forgot, but a way to add some sauce, and order of operations always matters for your nodes when you're doing stuff like this. And I want this vignette and this blur to affect this next part, which is light rays. Add that in. Ooh, that looks bad. But we're gonna change the source or the position from a location to an angle. And with this shot, because I've graded this before, but it takes some experimentation sometimes to see if this actually can work and what it looks like, what's the best angle. For me, it's about this because you get some leading lines as well, which can help just with the composition, increase the length and soften it not too much. And something that can really help is to pick a screen color, have it be this highlight color, and that can feel a lot more natural. Alright, I'm liking that. Subtle. Depending on how stylistic you want to be, you can make it more or less subtle, which is the nice thing, and you can really lean into it, and that can really work well for some type of shots. And since we put it here, it's also going to have the vignette and the blur affecting it, which is pretty cool. And if we want, we can take a look now again at our film look and see if we need to adjust it. So if I turn this off, softer, right, change the colors a little bit, and I'm liking this look, so I'm gonna actually turn this down to maybe like 0.2, and I think that's a lot better because I still like the contrast from this, but it was maybe doing too much. One minor adjustment I'm gonna do finally is after this subject node, I'm just gonna add an adjustment for these leaves because I think they're maybe a little bit too bright. Again, circle, blur the shit out of it, and just take that exposure down. And I think that makes this a lot less distracting. If I also want to, I can take the highlights down. Okay, yeah, I'm liking this. So we've ended up quite quickly with this shot. And if I just disable all the adjustments, we're going from this to this. Quite staggering. And I had just done the exposure, normal exposure, contrast, and saturation would not look this good. So really, it's in the little details. But once you have a workflow it's quite easy to do a lot of shots to this level. By no means am I like a colorist, professional colorist at all. I'm sure a professional colorist is ripping their hair out right now looking at this, but I don't really care. I go off of the vibes that I want for the shot. I know enough technical stuff to not completely ruin the integrity of my footage, but I'm also playing around with it. Also, YouTube channel, I got a lot of these steps from, this especially with the curves. YouTube channel called Runhaar. I'll link it in the description, but that guy's for real. So go check him out. Okay, bye.